understanding the psychology behind minimizing racism, exploring white Americans' perceptions of racial inequality. Welcome to today's episode, where we examine why some white Americans may minimize the impact of racism and whether these tendencies arise from psychological, social, or political roots. Our aim is to present a balanced, objective perspective, drawing on insights from social psychology, sociology, and lived experience. Let's begin by acknowledging that racism remains a persistent and complex issue in the United States. Yet, research and reporting consistently show that many white Americans underestimate its prevalence and significance. Why does this happen? The answer isn't simple, but by exploring the interplay of psychological, social, and structural factors, we can gain a clearer understanding. First, let's consider the psychological mechanisms at play. Studies suggest that motivated reasoning tendency to interpret information in ways that align with one's pre-existing beliefs or emotional needs can lead people to downplay the role of race in shaping life outcomes. For example, if someone is confronted with evidence that their achievements may be partly due to racial privilege, it can feel deeply uncomfortable, even threatening, to protect their sense of They may emphasize personal hardships or the effort they've invested, maintaining the belief that their status is the result of merit alone. Related to this is the concept of a just world, the belief that the world is fundamentally fair, and that success or struggle is primarily determined by individual actions. While this worldview can provide comfort and stability, it also has its pitfalls. It can foster a tendency to attribute others' difficulties to personal failings, overlooking the systemic barriers that persist for people of color. Another factor to consider is the overestimation of racial progress. Surveys indicate that many white Americans have a more optimistic view of racial equality than Black Americans, especially regarding issues like economic opportunity and social mobility. This optimism, while understandable, sometimes leads to the false impression that racism is no longer a significant concern, an outlook not fully supported by data on income, housing, education, and criminal justice disparities. Socially, the phenomenon of racial innocence can play a role. Some white Americans may hold the conviction that because they do not intend harm or do not consciously discriminate, they are disconnected from the broader problem of racism. This is often tied to a colorblind ideology, which suggests that ignoring race will help reduce its impact. However, research indicates that not acknowledging race can inadvertently perpetuate inequalities, as it leads to a lack of recognition for the very real ways in which race shapes people's experiences. The concept of white fragility, as coined by sociologist Robin DiAngelo, describes the defensive reactions that can occur when conversations about racism and privilege become uncomfortable. These responses, anger, denial, or withdrawal, can serve to shut down dialogue, making it harder to address and resolve issues around race. Finally, we must consider social and structural factors. For many white Americans, racism is not a direct, daily experience. This lack of exposure can contribute to limited understanding of how racism operates on a systemic level, affecting institutions such as policing, housing, employment, and healthcare without first-hand encounters. It's easier to assume that racial inequality is a relic of the past rather than an ongoing challenge. So, what does all this mean? Objectively, the minimization of racism among some white Americans is a multifaceted phenomenon. It is shaped by psychological self-protection, socio-cultural beliefs, and structural realities, all of which can interact in powerful ways. Recognizing these influences does not assign blame, but rather helps us understand the context in which perceptions are formed. A constructive path forward involves promoting empathy, encouraging critical self-reflection, and fostering open dialogue, while also supporting policies and practices that address racial disparities in concrete ways. By naming and examining these influences, we can help bridge divides and work toward a more equitable society. Tune in next time as we discuss strategies for turning understanding into meaningful action.